everyone. Welcome to my talk EXPLIoT, a journey to secure IoT. Before I start, I would like to thank IoT Security Foundation for giving me the opportunity to come and share my experience at the platform. Before I start, a bit about me. Well, as you can see, I wear multiple hats. I am one of the co-founders for a couple of conferences called Nullcon and Hardware.io. Uh, I'm also the co-founder of the security consulting company called Payatu, where we specialize in IoT embedded mobile and cloud security assessments. Other than that, we are working on a couple of products. One is from EXPLIoT itself, and the other one is called Cloud Fuzz, which basically scales up and is an intelligent fuzz testing platform. Other than that, I have written a bunch of open source software, and I'm a trainer at and speaker at various security conferences around the world. All right, let's get to it. So I'll be discussing about uh, our journey as well as the general journey of InfoSec professionals. We're going to talk about the last century. We're going to talk about what's happening now, what are the challenges, and then I will try and present some kind of a solution. So the story starts with in late 20th century, probably the last decade of 20th century, where there was a young and dynamic cybersecurity professional who was tasked with securing the customer's products, solutions, and assets. Well, in those days, that meant typically your standard IT stuff like web applications, servers, desktops, desktop software. Well, he did have his fair share of nightmares, but over time figured out the adversaries and their entry point. So by the end of the last century, the industry started to get a grip on the threats and attacks and issues with the traditional IT infrastructure, including products and solutions. But then new technologies started to pop up. So fast forward post 2010, the last decade, the same professional, now not so young, was tasked with securing the client's products, assets, solutions. Only this time the target was more complex. They were so varied and different, and the professional knew that securing them would be a challenge. So he started having nightmares again. And interestingly enough, the nightmares also upgraded themselves. He was dealing with a completely different monster altogether. So in the last decade, this is where we are in terms of new technology, IoT, AI, ML, 3D printing, and so on and so forth. We are trying to understand the uh, uh, the technologies and create a structure and a process around cybersecurity for these systems. Now let's look at the basic challenge when it comes to Internet of Things. Let's start with what is very apparent and visible. You have various threats and risks over the internet now, and you have adversaries creating weaponized malware targeting these IoT devices. You have zero-day attacks, not only on traditional technology but on new technology as well, including radio protocols and so on and so forth. Then there are network breaches, enterprise network breaches via these IoT devices. And one of the biggest challenges that if there is a bug in the hardware, then the manufacturer has to recall the products, which is a huge cost to the manufacturer. The second most apparent thing for the security teams or IoT security teams is the attack surface. It is huge as compared to traditional technology. I mean, to call IoT a product would not be doing justice to the system itself. It is more of an ecosystem because you not only have the hardware, you also have the firmware that is running on the device. You have sensors, then you have mobile application that talks to the cloud, talks to the device. You have new radio protocols, new radio technologies, using which these sensors and devices talk to each other. You have new IoT protocols on these devices as well as on the cloud. And finally, the beast, which is the cloud, where you have all the storage and analytics, and it communicates with the user through the mobile application and the device. The other challenge is, as manufacturers of IoT products, we do not manufacture everything, right? So we depend on third-party software as well as hardware. So when we create a product, it is a combination of libraries, software applications, and hardware components taken from various sources. So now getting a visibility into security of these components is a challenge. So you have to do a thorough security assessment of these components as well. And the security testing itself is more complex because of the attack surface, which we discussed, the supply chain. There are tools available for doing specific tasks. And then for new technology, there are hobbyist tools, there are open source software available, but it still poses the challenge that the security teams have to go through them, and some of them are not mature enough. So basically, it wastes a lot of time, important time of the security teams, which can be focused on doing actual analysis of the product. And so with that, the governments and non-profits, have also woken up and are coming up with new regulations, guidelines, and compliance standards. So I think for privacy, we have a very good example, which is GDPR, and then we have country-specific privacy laws. For IoT, generic IoT, we have California IoT security, we have ETSI standard, we have IoT Security Foundation checklist, we have ISO 27400, and so on and so forth. And then comes the domain-specific standards like IEC 62443, PCI, HIPAA, and so on and so forth. So we also started the same way. We didn't have magic tools or a silver bullet to solve the challenges. What we had was pure passion. When we started looking at IoT devices and we started into doing security research on IoT devices, we were all charged up, geared up, and we thought, how difficult would it be where we have all the basic concepts of the hacker mindset. All we need to do is just apply that mindset to the product or the ecosystem that we are testing. Throw anything on us, and we'll beat the crap out of that product. When we started doing the assessment, this is what happened. Based on the attack surface and the entry points, different IoT products had different interfaces. So we basically ended up looking at various open source tools, various open source and closed source proprietary hardware tools, and we knew that eventually this is going to become messy unless we define a process, or basically try to create some kind of an order in the security assessment, as well as the security process for IoT products. So we were basically spending a lot of time learning to use new tools, because every other product that we would test, the tools, the hardware tools we would need would be slightly different. So we would spend a lot of time learning on, and procuring these tools. We would spend time fixing issues with open source tools because they would not run out of the box. And so basically, we ended up writing custom scripts for each of the assessments that we would do, and then wait for the next product to come to repeat the same process. So we were in need of a savior or a silver bullet, and then we went back to the drawing board and uh, started thinking on how do we go about reducing the manual effort that is involved in security assessment. Obviously, there is part of the assessment that can never be automated, but then there are a lot of tasks in the assessment which can be effortlessly, which can be automated. So that leaves more time for the security professional to do analysis and evaluation. How do we reduce the learning curve? Let's say a new product has a new technology. Uh, how can we reduce the time in terms of directing the professional directly to look at specific test cases for that technology? Let's say a new radio protocol. How do we help the engineers to not worry about, oh, which hardware tool I'm going to use, what are the different attacks that I'm going to use, but rather guide the person so that they can do everything with ease without going through the protocol standards and tutorials and known attacks and everything. And uh, most important was how do we standardize this process? How do we create security test automation and misuse cases and help testers in going through a process of security testing each and every component of the IoT ecosystem? And finally, how do we do it from a single platform? Because there are things available for automation, but everything is spread out over the internet. So basically, what we were looking to create was a Swiss Army knife, which can answer all our pen testing needs for an IoT ecosystem. And that's when we stopped thinking, and I started with a project called EXPLIoT, IoT Security Testing Framework. This is open source now. We are far from done, but this is just a start towards that direction. You can download the source code from GitLab, or there is a Python package available. You can, if you have pip3, you can directly install the latest version of the framework. So with the framework, the idea was to give a wide coverage to the IoT technologies, to give plugins for radio as well as hardware analysis, and try and automate some of the misuse cases or security test cases. So I'll not bore you with the technical details of the framework, but it is truly a framework in the sense that it can be extended and it runs using plugins. So you have the core framework sitting in the middle in the red square. On the right hand side, you have the plugin modules. On the left hand side, you have a command line interface for the user. So if you've used tools for traditional security testing, tools like Metasploit and so on and so forth, think of it like that kind of a framework, but geared towards IoT. So there is a set of standard plugins available which can help users to do some analysis or communicate over a specific interface, and based on the need of the users or the organizations, you can customize it to any plugin. So you can write any plugins whatsoever you want and just add the plugins to the framework, and you can create so basically you can use it as automation for your IoT DevSecOps. You can include it in your CI/CD You can use it while you're security testing and so on and so forth. And it is a very simple framework as of now. Uh, let's say you want to create a new plugin to do specific tasks. All you need to do is just define three things in a plugin. Like, what is the plugin all about? What are the requirements for a plugin? The information that the plugin needs to run, and basically the business logic of the plugin itself, using the protocol interface that is already provided within the framework for the developers. So as of now, we have around 48-ish plugins which do different things. For example, we have plugins for most of the protocols like BLE. We have a BLE scanner. We have plugins for reading, writing, and fuzz testing characteristic values for BLE. We have MQTT publish, subscribe, authentication cracking. We have plugins for AWS IoT publish and subscribe. We have Modbus interaction capabilities, CAN interaction capabilities, DICOM basic interaction capabilities, COPE interaction capabilities. Interestingly, we have different discovery plugins. So you can, if you are in a network and you need to discover some of the devices, you can use different discovery plugins like for MDNS, UPnP, COPE, BLE, ZigBee. We have ZigBee functionality, and we have some hardware based plugins. For example, we have debug port scanner available. Just that the debug port scanner is not in the open source part that is used by we've created a hardware module that does the scanning. We have UART or serial access brute forcing, fuzz testing, custom consoles on the devices, and then we have I2C, SPI, read write capabilities, and a couple of exploits just to show the capabilities of the framework. And it is very simple to use. Once you install it, all you need to do is just run exploit, and you will get a command line interface for the exploit. You can run help or question mark to see the list of commands. Well, we just have basically two main commands, run and list. To execute a plugin, you just run, use the run command with the plugin name. And if you want to see the list of all the plugins available in the framework, you can just run the list command. So here, if you see, I've run the list command on the latest 0.9.5 version, and we have around 48 plugins. So the plugins are also ordered in terms of the technology, and then what whether the plugin is generic or is for a specific product, followed by the plugin name itself, which talks about what the plugin does. And we are working on day by day, we are working on adding more functionality to the framework. And if you have any suggestions, I would request you to send me an email on what are the things that you would like to see in the framework. Okay. This is what I call the shameless marketing slide. So before we end, I would just like to also mention that we are working on a commercial platform, and the idea of the platform is somewhat around the framework as well, to provide a single platform for security and compliance testing, as well as vulnerability management for IoT products and ecosystem, where you have a compliance dashboard. You can perform dynamic and static analysis of hardware, radio, firmware, and basically, if you have an IoT product, what we are trying to do is, from the single platform, provide you functionality to do different stuff like perform radio tests, perform hardware tests, perform firmware tests, perform tests on network interfaces of the device, which uses new IoT protocols, as well as do configuration security configuration review of standard cloud platforms which are used by companies, for example, AWS IoT, Azure IoT, and so on and so forth. And we have third-party integration so that so basically what we are trying to also solve with this is the IoT DevSecOps problems. So the platform is going to be API based, so you can use it in your CI/CD pipeline. We will also have integration with other third-party tools, for example, for issue tracking, uh, integration with Jira, Azure DevOps Server, and so on and so forth. So right now we are doing private beta for our existing customers. And if you are interested in learning more about the platform or just learning more about the open source framework, if you want to contribute to the framework, or if you have some suggestions, feel free to send me an email and we can take it on from there. So final words. Thank you so much for attending my talk. Stay safe, wear masks when going out, and wash your hands regularly. We will we will eventually get over this as well. Thank you.